To learn a lesson often ignored, let's all climb aboard the Lex Express. I'm Mike Quackenbush, and this is Till We Make It. Throughout my career, I've been really fortunate. I've worked in front of the cameras as a pro wrestler, referee, ring announcer, and commentator. And I've worked behind the scenes too, as a promoter, booker, agent, coach, and consultant. And this is part 4 of my series, Icons and Insights, in which I share with you wisdom that I've gleaned or lessons that I've learned from true superstars of professional wrestling. If you've become a wrestling fan just in the last 10 or 12 years, well, perhaps the name Lex Luger isn't a big deal to you. But as someone who consumed a whole lot of World Wrestling Federation television back in 1993, Lex Luger's a really big deal to me. It was a big deal when he jumped from WCW and joined the WWF, making his debut at the Royal Rumble 1993 as the Narcissist. But by the summer of 93, he's getting a makeover. They're repainting him as a patriot, and it starts when he sort of slams Yokozuna on the deck of an aircraft carrier. And then, to make sure that this babyface turn sticks, because they were really hoping he'd become the new face of the organization, they do what else? They put him on a bus tour called the Lex Express. And he travels from one end of the country to the other, more or less, stopping at shopping malls and meeting kids and signing autographs, which I'm pretty sure is how babyface turns are meant to work. If you don't remember that defining run of the all-American Lex Luger, well, you could be forgiven because his actual time as the face of the organization at most encompasses 3 pay-per-view events before the focus shifts back to Bret the Hitman Hart. Nevertheless, there are those of us that regard that era of the Lex Express bus tour with great fondness and a sense of warm nostalgia. So, years later, when I happen to be telling a story that was written in part as a love letter to exactly that, I thought, what could possibly make this better than to get Lex Luger himself involved? So, how do you go about finding a guy that's been out of pro wrestling for years? He's disappeared from the public view, and I gotta convince him to come out of hiding and play. Well, you do what I've always done in these situations. I decided to play 6 Degrees of Lex Luger. Who did I know that could get me one step closer to someone that actually knows Luger? And the first person that I spoke to warned me straight off the bat. They said, "You're not gonna wanna actually speak to Lex Luger. He's so arrogant, you won't be able to stand it." And I listened to this advice, and then I carried on. I moved on to the next person in the chain. And the next person in the chain had warned me. They'd said, "Listen, he's not even going to want to hear your pitch because all he cares about is money. And there's no way your company, your tiny little independent, is going to have enough money to interest Lex Luger." And I listened to this warning, and then I moved on to the next person. And surprise, surprise, the third person that I got on the phone about this warned me about how selfish Lex Luger is. But I moved on to the 4th person in the chain, and what do you know? They had a warning for me too. They said he is the unfriendliest person in all of professional wrestling. And as I moved 1 degree closer to Lex Luger with each step, it really seemed to me like this was someone who had made more enemies in the business than he had friends. But eventually, I did get Lex Luger's phone number, and I called him. And you know what? Despite the unfavorable remarks I had heard every step of the way, Lex Luger was really friendly. He was a total pro. More than that, he was generous with his time. What I proposed to him was this, that in order to make our angle perfect, the one which was a love letter to his Lex Express, we needed a promo from Lex Luger himself. And he was genuinely flattered. He offered to cut the promo to spec and deliver it to me within 24 hours. And when I got off that phone call, I reflected on all the warnings that I'd heard as I was attempting to hunt the man down. And I did wonder, will he come through? Will he really deliver this promo? But you know what? 24 hours later, I had that promo in my inbox, delivered to spec. I couldn't believe it. I wanted to show it to everybody on my team and then get it published as quick as possible so we could show it to the entire world. And when I called him to thank him and express how grateful I was for his participation, I offered to compensate him for the time and the energy that he had put into this. Because I realized it was probably some hardship, especially given at the time he was recovering from a spinal stroke. And he said, "No, you don't have to compensate me at all. I'm happy just to help." Now, does this mean that everyone who helped me track down Luger was lying to me about the kind of person that he was? Well, probably not. But this is a salient reminder that people change, people evolve, they grow. And I'm sure across the course of a long wrestling career, there probably were those moments where Lex Luger was not friendly to someone. I bet there were moments where perhaps he evinced an arrogant attitude. But that wasn't my experience with the man, and all I can tell you about is what my experience was. And I found him to not just be professional, but warm and friendly. If I had let people's bygone experiences with Lex Luger really affect me, then I wouldn't have worked so persistently to hunt him down. And I'm glad that I wasn't dissuaded. Not just because his participation made our angle that much more special, but also because it taught me this really important lesson. Who you were is not who you are. If I had been close-minded, if I had shut out the idea that Lex Luger could have grown or changed or evolved, then I would have missed out on both this connection and this experience, which I cherish and look back on fondly. I still love telling this story even 10 years after it happened. Conventional wisdom adhered to would have seen me quit this quest immediately after starting. But I've learned, not just from Lex Luger, but people in and out of wrestling, that the book on you yesterday doesn't define who you are today. And even a guy who seemingly left behind more enemies than friends deserves a chance to show how he's grown. Throughout the phases of your career, there are things you need to phase out, and I cover exactly that topic in the video appearing up here. Or if you want to become the kind of wrestler that every promoter wants to hire and every booker wants to write for, click on the video appearing down here so you can keep on learning.